Ray was better than that. Ray had many more victories than Harrier. Note that Harrier was a sloop, not a yawl. And Ray just did not think much of the yawl rig, even though it had its advantage under the old CCA rule. Later, he tried a cat rig. He was always trying something. Another sailboat design of his, which, I mean, we're switching gears here. The shoalers, these were called, and they're almost like they were designed as a counterpoint to the tens. Now, the tens were shallow, light, with big, deep keels. The shoalers were heavy, deep, with no keel. They were all centerboarders. Many of them had center cockpits, which was unusual for the time. There were 30, 40 footers, a few bigger ones were built, not too many. But look at the lines plan and look how simple it is and how symmetrical it is and how pretty it is. It took advantage of the CCA rule that gave an awful lot of advantage to shoal draft and centerboarders, which we found out years later with the O'Day Company, actually. So they were still using much the same. John Decretel wrote this comment about shoalers. He said, one of Ray Hunt's shoaler series of cruising racing sailboats, the 38, is characteristic. Centerboard, low wetted area, high displacement to suit the CCA rule. The shoal draft delivers a low rating and permits shoal water cruising. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful thing for the time. It has very low wetted area and a modern separated rudder, which was unusual for that period. There's no keel appendage. And in this, as he says, the shoalers were precursors of later Ted Hood designs. Stability is a result of high displacement with ballast, a fair extension of the canoe form. Some of the shoalers actually had transom sterns. Most of Ted Hood's, the famous Robins, were as a result of this basic design. But again, think of the tens and then think of this boat. And you think, well, where was this man's mind at? I mean, most designers are stuck in a rut. Certainly Ray was not. Now, for something a little different. The Boston Whaler, the venerable Boston Whaler. In the mid-1950s, Dick Fisher conceived the idea of a balsa wood pram to be light and unsinkable. He thought that would be popular. And then he discovered foam and fiberglass. But he wanted to build an improved sailfish design. Ray suggested to him, and they were pals, that he go to an outboard boat because it was a much bigger market. So they agreed to try that. Ray first sketched an idea version of the old Hickman sea sled, which, if you're not familiar with that, was kind of like an inverted V, kind of a catamaran, but with a big section in the middle. They were very, very stable, but the ride was horrible. So Ray added a center hull, and then he added another. They refined it, and they added another one. They went through various iterations. They finally got the Whaler hull that you see there to work acceptably well. Meanwhile, Dick was messing about with the foam and process, and eventually he kind of got that right, more or less, and the Boston Whaler was born. The process never quite got entirely right, and many, many semi-cooked whalers found their way to the Fall River landfill, I'm told. But by any measure, the Whaler, the Boston Whaler, and I wonder why it wasn't called the New Bedford Whaler? I mean, where did they get the Boston Whaler thing from? I don't know. I'd like to know that. It was a huge success, and Ray did see a reward for his part in it from Dick for years. They paid Ray royalties on the design, until Whaler was bought by a bunch of B-school types who decided they'd paid him enough, and they kind of weaseled out of the deal. But I won't mention any names. You might know them. Ray never endorsed the larger tri-hull whalers, the 17 Montauk, very popular boat. He thought by 16 feet, you should go back to a V-hull and get a better ride. But with a Whaler, certainly Ray can be credited with the creation of a whole genre of modern small boats with his tri-hull concept. Just another day at the office, or in the Ray's case, a day out of the office. Ray had his disappointments. Probably two major disappointments in his career. The first was Easterner, the 12-meter design done for the America's Cup Challenge in 1958. One of the handsomest 12s ever launched. She showed power and speed on occasion, but never really performed consistently well. Cartoon from the Boston newspapers. She had a full cruising interior, while the other 12s were already on the path of being stripped-out racing boats that have become standard today. Also, it was a Corinthian run operation the Noyes family had, perhaps a little less intense than other teams, I don't know. Ray occasionally sailed the boat himself, but perhaps not enough. We're kind of left to wonder what might have been had he sailed some more. There was one race on the New York Yacht Club cruise in 1962 on Buzzards Bay, which you could relate to probably, when the 12s, Columbia, Weatherly, and Nefertiti were battling it out in a light westerly. Ray and Easterner were badly beaten. But Ray took Easterner way up under Noshon and high of the finish line, which was off the Cuddy Hunk buoy at the time. The westerly died, and the 12s all sat there going nowhere. And then a southerly filled in. Guess where? Off the islands first, right? And Ray sailed home to take the Astor Cup an hour ahead of everybody else. It was a great example of Ray's ability to know where to go on the race course, or just when he's on the sea, he knows where to be. He could never explain this. He just knows. He just knows. I've heard from friends and family and read about it. It's a phrase I've heard over and over and over to describe Ray's uncanny sailing prowess. He just seemed to know where to go. But failure was followed by great success. These are 5.5 meters. This is Minotaur. He designed a nice boat in 1956, Quixotic, which he drew for Ted Hood and McNamara, purportedly another one of these designs in the back of an envelope. Clearly a fast boat, but unfortunately a rigging failure kept it out of the Olympics. But he made up for this with Minotaur here, number 26, in 1960, which was an even faster design, which George O'Day, with Jim Hunt, son as crew, they sailed to the gold medal in Naples against the best of the world. And according to Jim, Minotaur could slide right by other boats in light air. John Decknatel had this comment about the Minotaur design, and there's the hull lines for Minotaur. It looks fast, doesn't it? It's a very slippery looking, pretty lines plan. The 5.5 Minotaur is a perfect example of Ray's ability to pick the most important characteristic, ignore the rest, and produce a conceptually unique boat. For the 1960 Olympics, Ray designed Minotaur for light air in Naples. He took the basic profile, the hull and keel, of 5.5s of the late 50s, which he had no quarrel with, and produced a very slack, narrow waterline hull with very fine ends and low wetted area, which was smart for light air. From a rule point of view, he went to a maximum sail area, maximum length, and maximum displacement. Minotaur had the lowest wetted area of any 5.5 hull produced up to that point by a substantial margin. And Ray felt that that was very important. Wetted area, sail area ratio for you techno guys, he felt was much more important in light air racing than sail area displacement ratio. Minotaur was to prove a breakthrough, and Minotaur won the Olympics with relative ease and clearly unbeatable boat speed. And you can see from the lovely undistorted shape here, and there were some strange 5.5s drawn. Minotaur was particularly outstanding in waves to windward, and the hull form proved to be a far greater performance range than the tank test once again said. Ray didn't believe him. She was just another intuitive Ray Hunt design. There's a newspaper article. They don't really write newspaper articles about sailing anymore, not like these. We have Jim Hunt on the left and George O'Day on the right. And Jim, who's in the middle? Thank you. And this is the gold medal, not really that big, but still it's a... In 1963, after Minotaur's success, of course, he had commissions for 5.5s kind of poured in. It wasn't a huge market, but it was a prestigious one. In 1963, he designed a boat called Kaya II for a Finnish boat builder named Jussi Nemes. That's what you see here. The races were about to begin down in Oyster Bay when Jussi got word his boatyard had had a big fire, and he had to go home. He asked Ray to take over the boat, but Ray had never raced a 5.5 meter before. He jumped on the boat, and guess what? After 5 races, which he won 2 out of the 5, he had a 900-point lead over competitors, like Albert Fay, who was top 5.5 race, George O'Day, and Prince Harold of Norway, among about 25 odd boats or more. He was so far ahead after 5 races that he sat out the 6th race because he said it was really nasty out there. The rest sailed that last race for runners-up honors. The New York Times called him the, quote, the bespectacled grandfather from Tilton, New Hampshire. And when you look at the roster, as I did recently just putting this together, and the New York Times articles where they wrote lots of stories in those days about sailing, which, do they do that anymore? The roster of designers and sailors and the boats that he beat was amazing. Europeans absolute best, and Sparkman Stevens' boats were way down at the bottom, and Luder's boats, and Britt Chance was just beginning, and his boat, you know, barely got off the beach, and Ray's boats were just right up at the top. It was quite remarkable. And then, of course, he changed gears. Now for something completely different. This was what Ray called a Huntform. And he was designing these boats pre-war, during the World War II, and after World War II. Isn't that a beautiful photograph? I mean, in the water and the boat, and it's lovely. These were low dead rise boats, low speed planing hulls for the power that was available in those days, and it wasn't a lot. They had distinct bell-shaped sections forward, which you'll see in a minute. They're sort of typical of the boats of the time. They were not unusual, but he was evolving something. You could see it. They were quite efficient if you kept the weight of the boat down. That's true of most boats. In any event, a good number of Huntforms were built from about 20 to 40 feet by Graves up in Marblehead and other folks. And I want, in particular, the Hunt Yachts folks that are here to take note of the 3rd paragraph of this ad in 1948. If you can't read it, it says, "The hulls of these boats are stock. The superstructure, interior, and propulsion are custom built to your needs and specifications." Some things never change, right? How far we've come in 65 years. So Ray was building and selling boats as well as designing them. So we thought we had a good idea. Well, it wasn't particularly new in any case. After the war, a lot of high horsepower engines became available. This is a boat called Sea Blitz. It was designed by Ray for the Noyes family around a 1,500 horse V12 Packard engine war surplus. It went 50 miles an hour or more. I've heard as much as 60. I find that tough, but I've had trouble making boats go that fast. Maybe that's why. It was probably limited only by available propellers in those days. They weren't as nice as we have propellers today. But anyways, it was quite the boat. It must have scared an awful lot of people half to death. Now I'm going to show you the process. Here's the Huntform. There is Sea Blitz, and there is a boat called Gypsy Girl, but it's a typical deep V offshore race boat. Look at those hulls, and you can see the evolution of Ray's thinking about motorboats. You can see how Huntform at the top with its bell-shaped forward sections, and then things got straighter and straighter as it went. A lot of work was being done by the Navy during the war to develop better seaplane hulls, and those hulls took a beating, needless to say, and leaked badly. Well, a lot of them sank is what happened because they pound the rivets right out of them. So they were after a better hull shape for seaplanes, and Dan Savitsky, remember him, I mentioned him way back in the beginning, working for the Navy, discovered that bell-shaped sections actually had lower impact than V-shaped sections. Doesn't sound intuitive, but that's what they proved. Who knows, it might have involved advanced calculus, I'm not sure. But he published this data, and perhaps Ray was influenced by some of this work. Now look at just go down and look at the deep V at the bottom, and look at how the V runs all the way aft. And up the top, how it was flatter. It's a nice evolution. I think at some point Ray broke through the conventional thinking of the time, which was really represented by the Huntform, that a boat to be fast, you had to have a flat stern. And he saw that he could carry the V all the way aft if he kept the buttocks straight. Now, most of us don't have straight buttocks. And boats, but you want to have a fast boat, you better have straight buttocks. This is a buttock. It's a line, I'm sorry for the shakes, but it runs, it's a slice through the boat longitudinally, and there it is. And it's running uphill here. See it going back uphill. Here, with sea blitz, you can see it's pretty straight. It's almost parallel to the keel, isn't it? And here, it's absolutely parallel to the keel. And that's the key. That's the key. It doesn't matter how much dead rise you got in the back or in the middle or whatever, but if your buttocks are straight, you can make the boats go fast. I don't know how he figured that out, but he definitely did. And it was against the flow of what was going on at that time. Note the addition of the lift, what we call lift strips, these strakes, spray strakes, whatever you want to call them. They don't show up in profile, I'm sorry, but they show up here. That was an addition that he came up with, and I'm not sure how. They have multiple functions, and a major feature of the boats that really make the boats work. They clear the water off the hull, as you might imagine. They make it dry.